Call the meeting to order at 7:02. Yeah, whatever the beeping is, if somebody could stop that, thank you. All right. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. So do I make a motion to approve them?
So I would move we accept the minutes for December 19th.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 All right, we have some warrants to approve. Payroll 113, 114, vendor 1019, 1020, 1021, 1022, 1109, and 1110.
Make a motion to approve them.
Second?
Second. Did you?
Nope, I was
Second.
looking to you. All right, any discussion?
Nope.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Caitlin, do we have any gifts that we need to accept?
No gifts, just the one grant.
And the grant. So we have an IDEA Part B grant for $6,107.
I will make a motion to accept that.
Second.
Any discussion? Caitlin, do you want to just give a quick, what that is, quick overview?
IDEA.
Just the grant, is it just a grant that we?
It's our special education grant.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry, I should have asked John. Sorry, I put you on the spot. Report of the Gil Montague representative.
Good evening. So the report, the budget is up 2.5% overall for the district. More students are staying and not choicing out, which is good news for them. And they calculated that per pupil spending is $16,366 per student. Erving's tuition is going down $158,000, so the total tuition cost is currently budgeted at $980,000. The Everyone Eats Free program has allowed the food service to have a surplus, which is like the first time in forever, so they were very happy about that. And the draft budget for the district is $28,176,509, and they are having a line-by-line budget meeting tonight. I have some news on regionalization. Do you want me to wait till the regionalization report?
I guess. In case there's other
Yep,
things that we
yep.
want to talk about. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Thanks. Is that it for Gil Montague?
Yes, that is
Okay.
it for Gil Montague.
So then we'll move right into the Franklin Tech.
Okay. Franklin Tech update, the budget's a 3% increase for each of the member towns. Erving currently has 28 students attending. Senator Comerford visited the tech school on December 14th and was very impressed with how engaged the students were with their shops and throughout the day. The feasibility study is moving forward regarding a potential new school build. Whether it'll be a new school building or renovation, that's what the feasibility study will determine. The ninth grade graders are now in their shops. The 2024-25 school year applications as of January 13th, there were 199 completed applications, 17 10th grade applications, 4 11th grade applications. There were 40 more applications in process. There is one more open house on February 15th, and it's expected that we will receive about 240 ninth grade applications, and the projected enrollment is between 170 and 185 students.
So just so I'm clear, so are you saying they're projecting 240 for ninth grade, but they're only going to accept about 170?
Between 170 and 185.
Okay, so there's going to be a significant number that will not
Yes,
make
yep.
it. Great. Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that.
Right. They will have the aviation program up and running, so that's partly the increase, and the veterinary building will be completed, so. National Honor Society news, there were 19 juniors inducted, so that's a total of 30 students overall in the National Honor Society. They have 8 students out on dual enrollment, which is the highest number forever, is the way that the principal put it. Co-op, there are 50% of the juniors are out on co-op. They purchased a new boom lift with a Perkins grant, and the grants are up overall because the enrollment's up overall. That's the way that it works. And recently, 40 adult learners were, they graduated from the CIT program, and they're going to be starting another adult program very soon. And I think that was about it, unless you have any questions.
No, it was great. Thank you.
Report of the Erving Teachers Association.
Yep. So these are just some updates, some positive things happening in the building from grade 2. After researching basic economics, second grade students thought deeply about what the world would look like if everyone worked together to share resources and take care of one another. In this ideal city, all humans are welcome and all people get what they need to live happy, healthy lives. Students worked in different departments: transportation, education, healthcare, safety departments, and more. They selected a job to fill within their department and what traits they would need to possess to be successful. Last, they built their ideal city out of recycled materials, ensuring all accessibility resources were included. We'd love to live there. That's so great. It's like the book, If the World Were a Village. They put one, I feel like there's been a handful, you know it? I feel like there's been a handful of those printed, and it paints the world. If it were a village of 100 people, what would that look like? And it's just so, that's pretty cool. In health class, nope, not health class, health. So despite the many illnesses afflicting the world beyond the doors of EES, strep throat, GI bug, conjunctivitis, flu, RSV, common colds, and COVID, the students and staff have been fairly healthy. Attendance for students has been 94% since the beginning of school. I appreciate, this is from our nurse, I appreciate that parents are keeping kids home when they're sick, calling me if they aren't sure if their students should attend school, and having them return as soon as they are able. Class Dojo has been phenomenal for exchange of information between families and myself. I appreciate the open dialect and the ease at which we communicate. Okay, technology class. In technology, third graders have been learning keyboarding and have also been practicing coding to make on-screen characters perform tasks. In the classroom, students are learning to navigate Google Classroom to complete a variety of assignments. After recently reading about the Statue of Liberty, the children are experimenting with liquids to see if they can cause copper pennies to oxidize and turn green like the statue. Occupational therapy and physical therapy. They've set up a new sensory pathway in the back hallway for students to use for purposeful movement breaks. This project was funded by local donors, so it's up and running now. I think we talked about that last time. The math team has been using results from the universal screeners for number sense to help assess students' progress in math so far this year. These results are used to inform classroom instruction as well as intervention. And finally, for speech and language, there's a free webinar for parents and caregivers of children with autism from the May Institute on Thursday, January 25th, 5:15 to 6:30. Please see our newsletter if you would like some more information. And so that's just a little snippet of lots of the wonderful things that are happening in our building. Do you have any questions?
No, I appreciate hearing the update, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
Great.
And if you don't mind forwarding it to me again.
Sure.
Thank you. All right. Collaborative for Educational Services report?
There is no report because our next meeting is January 31st, so there hasn't been a meeting since.
Okay. Okay, back up to the regionalization update.
I did forget one thing about the Gil Montague report. I put it at the end of my notes. So there is a proposed field trip for French and Latin students to Paris and Rome, to Greece and Rome for March. One class will go in March of 25, and the other class will go in March of 2026, 2025, and more details were forthcoming. So the six-town regionalization update, it's moving forward. They talked about this at the Gil Montague Regional School District meeting. They are in whole support of it. However, it will only move forward if all six towns approve the creation of the district. So I did ask on behalf of the Erving School Committee how this would impact our tuition agreement that we have with Gil Montague Regional School District. If the new district was formed, our agreement would be null and void. It seemed to surprise them that I asked that question. And I also mentioned that our agreement says there's a 5-year waiting period. Once either party initiates a change, it's 5 years in the future. So it was agreed that they should probably look at our agreement moving forward in case the district does happen. And the business manager, Joanne Belisle, was going to look into that further. I also inquired about the potential that this might be a time for Erving to join the district as regionalization. I said, I'm just inquiring, I don't know what's going to happen, but is that a possibility since you're forming a new district? Some members seem to be under the impression that a hybrid district would not be allowed, but I did bring up that it occurs at Mohawk with a number of their towns and also over at Amherst Pelham with Shutesbury and Leverett. So Joanne was also going to do a little more investigating about that. And that's it for right now. If you have any questions or any directives, just keep reminding them that we have impact. It impacts us if it moves forward. Is that sufficient? Yes, Mark.
So if I understand it, let's say that it takes them 2 more years or 3 more years for them to get organized and make it happen, get all the towns to vote in favor, and they do it, then we would have, and then they decide, well, let's change that agreement, then we would have 5 more years?
So that was the question that I posed to them when I first said, how is this going to impact Erving? And Bill Tomes from Gil said, well, you'll just tuition. I said, no. Our agreement is with Gil Montague Regional School District. It becomes null and void if a new region is formed. And then he's like, well, we would just tuition. And then I was like, yes, but our agreement states it's a 5-year window. So my question to them was, when is, does the 5 years start when you start the regionalization? But they were talking about fast tracking the regionalization to within 3 years the new region would be formed and they would be going to their 2 separate schools. So that's when it got a little dicey, and the business manager said she would look into it. So I don't think they were really thinking about what our tuition agreement is with them. Well, it's a legal contract, so.
It could be as much as 8 years down the road. Could be as much as 2 years down the road. Thank you.
Is there another meeting scheduled?
So the 6-town regionalization committee is done for the most part. They made their pitch. The towns, the school districts weighed in on it one way or the other. Well, 5 of them did, of the representatives. I don't believe that they've heard from Northfield or that. I don't believe they're going to be meeting again from what I got from the discussion, other than moving forward. The next step is to bring it to the communities, and it's up to the towns to vote on. But I got the impression they were going to do it rather sooner than later. So maybe this year at their annual town meeting, or maybe next year. But I thought the way they were talking, it was going to be this year.
But they do have that major issue where the 2 major school buildings operate on different methods of scheduling their students, grouping their students, So if they all vote in, then they'd have a period of time to get reorganized.
They would, but again, I was just looking out for Erving's interests and wondering how that impacts us.
Thank you.
So at this point, we're just waiting to hear if they bring it to their town meetings this spring?
I suspect that it'll be on the agenda. Again, it wasn't on the agenda this meeting tonight because they're going to talk just about the budget, but they did promise me that it's usually on the agenda on a regular basis. I'll again ask the next meeting, have you looked up the agreement? Have you figured out how it's going to impact Erving? You know, and that sort of thing. And I'm going to assume once they look at the agreement, they're going to reach out to Union 28 or to the Erving School Committee and have a discussion. Most likely they should be reaching out to you, but I don't know if they know that.
Okay. I'm wondering, at some point, I'm going to assume or suggest that we might need to get a legal opinion about the contracts and how that is impacted.
They did mention.
Once decisions
Right.
are made, or once we have a clear path of how the decisions are going to be made.
At the meeting, they did decide that perhaps they should also contact legal counsel to figure out how it's going to impact our agreement. So as soon as I hear anything more, I'll report back to you.
Okay. Scott, did you have a question?
More of a statement. I was just gonna say, that Jackie had addressed a lot of the concerns that I had related to that and how the contract would be impacted. Rather than waiting for what the 6-town regional or each individual member town does on their votes, I would proactively ask that the school committee look at what do you envision as your involvement in a new district, should there be one that is move forward? Would you just be renegotiating a new tuition agreement? Would you be entertaining a hybrid regionalization? Start having those conversations now, because that'll aid in the conversation if and when that those member towns, if they decide to form, at least then you've had those preliminary conversations to move along that portion of it. The 5-year agreement can always be amenable if it's mutually agreed
Yep.
upon. So it's not, that's not a hard and fast, as long as all parties are in agreement. So if it looks like Erving would just like to continue to tuition, and they were already in that assumption, you could start working on, through legal, what would that contract look like? What would that, because you're right, it wouldn't just roll over, it's a whole new entity, so it'd have to be renegotiated. So I would
And we-
start that now in advance.
And we could look at other agreements with other districts. It doesn't necessarily have to be whatever this new Gil Montague,
Yeah.
Pioneer Valley.
Yeah. I would much rather lead the conversation than follow it. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, if someone wants to reach out to, Brian Beck is the superintendent over there, so I don't know if it's him that you would reach out to first or the business manager.
Who is the chair of the regionalization committee?
It's, Jane Oakes is the chair for the Gil Montague Regional District.
Were you talking about the 6th town or just Gilmore Region?
No, the sixth. The committee.
Sixth town, I
Yeah.
believe, I
They're
think
the
Bill,
ones
it's
that
Bill
came and
Tomes,
talked
who's on the
to
Gil
us.
Montague School Committee.
Were they the chairs?
Of the committee
Yeah.
itself, not Gil Montague, but
No,
of
no,
the whole,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
I
them?
believe that was
Okay.
them. But it sounds like they've kind of dissolved and now it's being pushed off to the towns to figure out what they want to do next.
Right, I mean, so it was like, when I brought it up first, there was a look of surprise on their face that I was even bringing the conversation up, even though I have in public brought it up before. And Bill Tomes was like, well, you'll just tuition. I'm like, no, we won't just tuition. We won't have a tuition agreement with you. And then we got into some more dialogue, and they haven't read our agreement. And so that led off to another part, well, maybe we should have legal counsel look. And what I said to them was, I would hate for you to move forward with this, get the okay, and then find out that you're stuck with our agreement and you can't regionalize because nobody's done and looked at the agreement. And I said, my job is to report to the Erving School Committee and to protect the interests of the town of Erving for their students. So they all agreed that they would do that, but I think that Scott is right, that being proactive and reaching out and saying, we understand that you're at the point where this might move forward, you know.
To the chair of Gil Montague.
Gil Montague, Jane Oakes is the chair.
Oh, because they're the ones that are.
Well, that's
kind
where
of
our agreement
leading
is
it.
with Gil Montague. It's
Yeah.
not with the new hybrid district.
Right, okay.
We should also reach out to the legal counsel
Yeah.
about what our actual agreement
Yep.
says.
Yeah.
We got those two tasks to do.
I agree, yes, I agree, but I would have to, I think that at some point, this regional committee has got to have some sort of reconvening, because is Jane Oakes gonna then lead this for?
No, I
So
don't
they-
know, I don't know what the mission of the sixth town would be past this point. Their point was to investigate whether or not it was feasible or not. They took a vote and said, yes, we want to move forward. What happens after that, I'm not sure, and then maybe that's a question you could ask them.
Okay.
But it's to the point now where we should probably see how it's going to impact us.
Yeah, I mean, somebody's got to come together to create a new document, decide what they want to put in the doc, so some body has to be created to do that. That's what I was trying to get at. I thought it would be this regional committee, but if it's not, who the people are that are doing that work, because we would want to be involved in that too, if we chose to continue with that,
Or if
setup.
we chose to look at the possibility of a hybrid regionalization. Those are all, this is the point now where you would be having that discussion. But they honestly thought the tuition agreement would just continue like it does with Vernon, and then what they're working out with Warwick. But
All right,
I've had some discussions with the person, and I was digging through my phone to try and figure out what his name was.
yeah, I can't remember his name either.
Who headed that up. Initially, he's from Warwick,
Yeah,
and he came here and
Yep,
spoke.
and
And
he
I
did.
talked to him about something else, so I have his
Yeah, I can look
contact.
it up.
I can reach out to him and see what he has to say about
They
our
didn't
situation.
know much, and that was the problem. Because I've asked the same questions in the meetings and have not gotten answers, and was told to go back to our superintendent, go back to our town, and not looking on their end.
but even just if we could get a little bit clarity on what, yes, the towns have to vote, but what's happening after that? Who is the committee that is going to be moving it past that point? Because we would want to be, if we're choosing to stay with that, be involved in that committee. So, or that group, or that, whatever they want to call themselves. So,
Greg,
Yeah, that's him.
yep. I'm not going to try because I don't want to butcher it.
Snedekeker, in case anyone was wondering what I'm looking at. There we go. So Greg is the vice chair. So
Oh,
he-
that's the vice chair. That's not the one I was talking about.
So then there should be. I know
Okay,
they.
I can think
wait,
of-
I know they
we'll
were
find
very close together.
He's on my
so
list.
Alan
He's
might be the
somewhere.
other
Oh,
one.
Alan, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that name, sorry, I'm terrible with names. So certainly something that we need to be thinking about and have on our radar moving forward.
Okay. So I'll call him and
Thank
see
you.
what he has to say. And say we're trying to get ahead of it all.
Yep.
And do we need to ask our lawyer to look into the current agreement as to what it actually says?
So I'd like to gather a little bit more information, and then we can, I think.
That sounds
would be
fine.
A step down the road, yeah. All right, so then, capital planning committee meeting update. We, and certainly Caitlin, you jump in because you're on the committee, but we met earlier tonight to talk about, the topic that we had on our agenda was, the roof, and, making, a beginning plan for how to address the roof issues. We have leaking issues, we have, the HVAC system is up on the roof, that's an issue. You know, we talked about several different things, one of which, or the main, thing that we landed on was that we're going to be looking at getting an engineering firm in to look at the roof, but also the structures underneath the roof, to assess if there's any structural damages that's happened from the leaking of the roof or for any other reason, and to ask them to kind of make a plan for us about moving forward. And then that'll be a longer process of deciding how we want to move forward with the project, as far as, do we want to do the roof and the HVAC together? Are we going to do them as separate projects? The different funding sources. So it's a much larger project. But to start with, we are looking into getting an engineering firm. So I would like to just take a vote tonight to move forward with that. Brian Smith, the town administrator, is going to assist us in that process of finding that engineering firm. So I just want to.
Just to add, skylights, because they're a major source of leak. So it's the roof, the build, you know, so in our vote, we include the skylights as well.
Yeah, so what we're going to vote on tonight is just to move forward with procuring an engineering firm.
Who will
Well, they're all the
then
issues
identify the
Exactly.
issues and have them individually listed.
But for sure, the skylights are a source of a leak, so they would have to be addressed. So what I want to do tonight is just, in public session, just take a vote that we are moving forward with asking Brian to assist us with that process of finding an engineering firm, getting a price, and then moving forward with that process. So would someone like to make that motion, or I can make that as a motion?
Yeah, there was some way he wanted it stated, wasn't there? Or was that on something else?
Nope, that's something else.
Well, so moved. I want to see us move forward on the roof
Yeah.
now.
I'll second.
Great. So any other discussions about that? Again, this is a much bigger project with a much more involvement of various people and costs and everything. And this is just the first step in this process. Anything else we want to say about that? All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
And so we will keep that on our agenda so that we can update along the way. Okay, we're up to superintendent's report.
The Student Opportunity Act, as shared by DESE, calls for every district and charter school in our Commonwealth to develop 3-year plans, and those are referred to as SOA plans. We've done one. We started it in 2019. COVID interrupted that a little bit, and we resubmitted in 2020. These plans identify where the data reveals disparities in student learning opportunities and outcomes for the student groups that they serve. These plans will describe how we will utilize evidence-based approaches and strategies to address those disparities. The SOA plan addresses a subset of our district's overall initiatives through focus on evidence-based programs and strategies that will improve the educational experiences and outcomes of our students, including, but not limited to, English learners, students with disabilities, and low-income students. To that end, our district's Student Opportunity Plan will spotlight critical, actionable, evidence-based programs and strategies that are focused on rapidly improving outcomes for students with low academic performance. This year, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education embedded evidence-based programs, or EPBs, that we must identify in our SOA plans within the larger context of DESE's strategic objectives for schools. So over this month and into the next month, the leadership team will be crafting a draft of our 2024 Student Opportunity Plan. Once the draft is complete, we will be looking for stakeholder feedback. And that's my report around Union 28 updates. And the next item, I believe, from last month's was an update on the principal search. So as you know, I am retiring. We have a new superintendent coming in, and the change in superintendents with a change in principalship is concerning for Erving Elementary. I think it's important that we have as much as much as possible, keep things where they are. And to that end, I am reappointing Dr. David Crane for one more year as interim principal for our next school year. This will also address the concern the committee had about a new superintendent not being able to appoint or search for a new principal.
Yay.
In the discussions of the new superintendent search, has that been made aware to any of the finalists that that's something
I'm not
that they're gonna be doing?
participating in that. I'm sure that there is some discussion perhaps, but I couldn't speak to that.
Okay.
Nothing I can say.
That's right.
Yeah, it has to, there was a one open session, but, that last, yesterday, but nothing was discussed there along that line.
Okay.
So what you're saying is you've decided not to go forward with the document you put out on principal search timeline?
That was a tentative timeline, yes, and in discussions with staff and Dr. Crane, I have decided to reappoint him for one more year, and he is willing to stay on, actually very thrilled to stay on and finish his work with staff. And I did share that with staff this afternoon.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Nope, that's my report for this evening.
All right, Director of Finance and Operations.
So most of the items I have in my report are actually votes to be taken later. So at this time, the votes are going to be on the 5-year transportation contract, the budget discussion, and the end of year report audit. So those 3 votes, I can go into each one of those things before you choose to vote on it. But I can answer any questions about the expenditures that I provided to you before the rescheduled meeting.
So I'm sorry, do you want us to be asking you questions about the budget now, are you saying? Or are you looking to just go over what's in your report?
Yes, so if you have questions about the expenditures now for my report portion, I can answer. But everything else that I would report on requires a vote, which is scheduled later in the agenda.
I see.
So I have a question from last month's expenditure report. And it was more of just calling out that we had spent almost $1,000 in office supplies, with the majority of that funds being battery-operated wall clocks. And so just wanting to get more information, and maybe it's, you don't have this answer tonight, but kind of investigating what that issue is and why we're needing to buy more clocks, versus looking at what is wrong with our clocks and that being brought up to school committee, and then looking at, does that need to be a capital planning thing? Do we need to find out what the real underlying issue is and what that would cost, and then move forward with actually buying those? Not that I don't think we need clocks, so that's not that part, but it's more of that bigger picture of moving forward, how can we not be buying batteries, not be buying more wall clocks, because the cost of that is just going to continue. Because, I mean, wall clocks nowadays don't last very long, no matter how much you pay for them, it seems like. So I don't know if that's something that you know the answer to, or?
I don't know, but I can get
Okay.
back to you in the next meeting.
Okay. And then the other question that I posed last meeting was just around the amount of money that we are spending in special ed contracted services. And so that amount of $13,606.25, what was the time frame for that bill? Like, was that 1 month? Was that 2 months? Was that for the first 6 months?
Yeah, I would have to look specifically at the warrant, at the invoice of the warrant to give you that answer right now, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay. Because then the other question to that is how many of these services, if we had certain positions filled or had certain positions at this school, could be fulfilled instead of contracting the service, and what would the cost ratio be for something like that? So
Yep, I can
just
get
kind of
back to you
looking
on
at that. That's what I had from last meeting.
Mackenzie, excuse me, I think Tom was looking.
Oh, yep, sorry, go ahead, Tom, my head was down.
Go back and address the clocks.
I'm sorry?
I can go back and address the clock situation. So I didn't realize that the battery power clocks were being purchased, and I've been kind of off and on working on the master clock issue, which has not been cooperating, and that's why the clocks have been a problem. Around the same time those clocks were being purchased, I have discovered a bypass, and I've been able to bypass the master clock and get all the clocks working again. And they've been holding time properly. I did it probably about back in December. And then I found out shortly after that that all these clocks came in, which I was not aware of, so, but.
So do we need them? Can we return them?
I assume so. As far as I'm concerned, our clocks are now functioning properly again with the bypass that I've been able to find.
I mean, if that's the case, and you feel confident that you've solved the problem, or, bypassed the
Right.
problem, then I would recommend that we return the clocks if they're not needed.
They weren't installed, were they?
Yeah?
Would you agree? Has the clock's been working in your classroom? Yeah.
So, does anybody know if the clocks were installed?
No, as far as I know, they're still in the boxes, because Eric and I have had discussions about it. So he was gonna hold off putting them in.
Okay, so I'd like to please recommend that we return those clocks if they're not needed, and thank you, Tom, for solving that problem.
Thank you very much.
So who do we?
So, Jen, can you please just work that out with Pat to get those returned?
I'll talk to Principal Crane and have him talk to Pat.
And then, Caitlin, if you're going to address this at another point, just let me know. But under line 38, the therapeutic services, there was a question as to what the breakdown of positions covered for that line. And I see that you gave us a breakdown of positions, and this is for FY25. The breakdown comes to 381.47. But it's a difference of $111,919 in the budget. Can you just speak to that?
We can talk about it when we talk about the budget, or I can address it now. We have, with the end of the ESSER money, we have the adjustment counselor position that's moving into the local budget with an addition of a BCBA. So there was a time where the school had posted for adjustment counselor, psychologist, and BCBA all at the same time, hoping to get someone into that role in the middle of the year. And we have hired a BCBA at this time, and we'd also like to move the adjustment counselor in.
So we're going, at one point it was adjustment counselor / psychologist / BCBA to just see who we could get, right? And I did read that a BCBA had been hired. So we're going to keep an adjustment counselor and a BCBA. I guess, Jen, this is more of a question for you.
Yes, to address the needs in the school and to perhaps create some programming to support our students who are our most neediest students relative to social emotional health.
And is this in addition to funding the LSC and staff for that?
So the Learning Support Center was a model that we had previously. We're looking at other support models, very similar to the LSC, and both the BCBA and the adjustment counselor would help service those children as well as other children on IEPs, 504s, and students who are in crisis or in need.
So does that mean that there will not be a designated LSC?
It may have a different name, but we are looking at a program that would support our students who are in need.
A separate program or just a resource? I guess, is it like, because I think the LSC used to be a separate classroom
Yep.
that held specific students.
Yes, it was, but it wasn't a substantially separate program. It was more flexible. Students could come in and out. Right now, Principal Crane is researching some options with staff members around supporting our neediest students and what that might look like.
So is that going to mean that that more staff is going to be hired to fund this, whatever it's called? It used to be called the LSC, but whatever it is going to be called in the future?
It's all the staff that are listed in the FY25 budget projections under personnel.
But it won't be the same program that it was when it was the LSC. Am I understanding that right?
It may not be right because it's based on the needs of our current students and where the principal, in conjunction with staff, are seeing where needs need to be met. So it may be students who have individualized plans. It may be students who are needing some additional support. But it will not exactly look like what was there previous, but it will be a program to support our students. To that end, the adjustment counselor and the BCBA will be personnel that will be assisting and be needed in that program.
And just remind me, do we currently have an adjustment counselor?
We do not. That position was not able to be filled.
Okay,
as an
so
adjustment counselor.
And the ad is still out there?
I believe the personnel list you're looking at is for FY25, so if the budget is approved, those are the positions we would be looking for to staff the school and the program.
Yeah, going forward, that's still your hope, is that you find an adjustment counselor?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll ask more specific budget questions further down. Okay.
Can I ask a grant question during this time?
Yep.
Does that make sense? Okay. So I just saw that the Massachusetts Department of Early Ed and Care just opened up an application or a grant for school districts to apply for, which is the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative. The focus is on gateway cities, but they also are really considering this grant for areas, rural areas that don't have a lot of access to preschool and where children are, it's hard for them to find care. So this grant is really to support the districts and the public school preschools to be able to have these great programs and to help fund those programs. There are different parts of it, so I, kind of briefly read through it. But I just, A, wanted to bring that to your attention if you didn't already know, and B, see, is that something that is being looked into or could be looked into to see if that would be worth our while to try to get funding for. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that was the grant that we talked about actually today in our
We did
central
talk
office
briefly about it. I do know that there are quite a few grants that are really They are competitive and they are focused on gateway cities, as Caitlin explained.
Yeah, I mean, this one specifically in it, when I was reading through like the requirements, it said, yes, that is a focus. However, like they are looking at rural schools, and I don't have it exactly up. There was many pages. Okay, where is it? So preference will be given to public school districts serving children in gateway cities, and number 2 would be public school districts that have identified significant local gaps in preschool access. So, you know, the need for just childcare in general in this area is huge, and then just other barriers on top of that. So just something to look into.
Yeah.
I often, EEC does not put out grants for school districts, so this is really exciting that they're trying to combine that and allow additional funding to be available to schools to encourage preschools, which is great.
So the part of our meeting we had this morning, so Gillian Budine, our CNC coordinator, did bring one of those pieces to ask if we were eligible for one part of that, which we determined we weren't, but she's really great at looking through the grants and making sure that whatever we are eligible for, that we apply for.
Do you know the code on that specific one? Does it say the fund code?
Yep. Somewhere. You're probably better at looking at this than I am.
It usually does. We'll get it to you. We'll get it to you just so we don't spend time right now doing it. I'll have to take a little better, closer look at it. Not over your shoulder.
No, you're good.
All right, we'll get it that to you, because that does sound like something that we should at least try for. There's no harm in trying. All right, I have a couple of questions about grants, but I'll hold off until we get to the budget question. So your FY25 budget overview, secondary major drivers of the budget, updated information received from Gil Montague, has a decrease in special education tuition, special education tuition for public schools. Hearing that it was Gil Montague, the assessment, the amount went down, right, for us?
Yes.
Is that reflected?
It is, but it's an estimate. We don't know until the fall what the actual amount is going to be.
Okay. But so is the amount that was reported on tonight reflected in here or not?
It should be.
No, it is. They, Caitlin, I looked at it, she just broke it out into regular education and special education, but the amount totals the 980 that Gil Montague had for earnings tuition.
Okay, yeah, and I totally understand that it can be flexible based on the number of kids and everything come fall, yep. Okay.
But especially since they don't know how many of our students will go to the tech school. I mean, that number varies. I did ask Joanne Malile about that, and she will look at it in September. Or October, I think she said.
Yeah, it was week with October 1st.
October 1st. Yeah.
Yep, yep. All right, do we have any other questions? We can bring them up at budget, at the more in-depth budget discussion as well.
That works.
You okay with that?
I'm all right
Anything
right now.
pressing? Okay, all right. So Caitlin, was there more that you wanted to say?
No, I'll wait for the vote later in the agenda.
Okay. All right, so we're up to the principal's report.
Yep, the school committee all has the principal's report. He gave enrollment, a total of 124 students, a calendar of events, everything from Saving Makes Sense and field trips to grade level meetings across Union 28 and professional development with the Hill Science of Reading training. He welcomed new staff. Erica Taro is our board certified behavior analyst. She began on January the 8th. Under recent events, Dr. Crane shared that the kindergarten class went on a walking field trip to the Erving Senior Center, and families were invited to participate in the preschool's gingerbread house building project. And there was an all-school sing, and the turnout was spectacular. And I guess this was prior to our last Tuesday snowstorm, but the school was abuzz with the excitement for their first snowfall. Dr. Crane also mentioned hiring the BCBA will add a much-needed dimension as we continue at Erving to grow our capacity to provide a diverse set of supports for our students. However, as he previously mentioned, there is still a significant need for additional school-based mental health support for children who are already identified as needing intervention, as well as children who are beginning to present with such needs. And work continues on the handbook revisions and on the school improvement plan. And in February, the finalized documents will be submitted to my office. And a special thank you for all of those staff members who are assisting Dr. Crane with the handbook and the school improvement plan. It's much appreciated.
On the calendar events, it mentions that there's several dates for grade level meetings. Did he, my question would be, when during the day was that?
Those are hosted by our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, so I will ask you, Director Rodriguez, to answer that question.
So they happen 8:30 to 11 on certain, whatever days that grade level is scheduled.
And so there's just a sub hired for the teacher that day?
Hopefully, if you know more subs, we always need subs in our schools, but yeah.
Okay.
Yep, and we're doing grade level meetings, and then we're also doing classroom visits, so those have also been happening as well.
So are the classroom visits separate from the grade level meetings?
Yes.
So
And is-
like, for example, today, all of the third grade teachers in Union 28 went to one third grade classroom and were able to visit that classroom, see what's happening, and then debrief after to reflect on what they saw and what they could then implement in their rooms.
So knowing that there is like lack of subs, and that knowing that these grade level meetings are happening during the day, has that impacted these classrooms that aren't able to find subs and the children that are in those classrooms? And
Our
would it-
principals are really wonderful at providing coverage, including doing the coverage
Right,
themselves.
we know we have a half day every Wednesday, so I just wasn't sure why that
Be-
PD time might
Because we
not
have
be a
other
better time.
PDs scheduled on Wednesdays, and the classroom visits need to occur when there are students there.
Yeah, this is separate though.
The
she
grade
said.
level. Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we altered the grade level meeting schedule twice this year to accommodate because of the need for subs. And that is feedback we're looking at for next year. But we had so much PD right now happening with our PD and equity with the collaborative that happens on Wednesdays, as well as some of the PD for the science of reading happening on Wednesdays, that buildings also need time. I can't take every Wednesday, even though I would love to, but I can't. Buildings need time with their individual buildings as well. But that's definitely a piece to think about for
And
next
it's
year.
something that
and
staff has
something
been
we're already talking
asking
about.
for, and we're in schools with one classroom per grade level, as you all know, so this is really needed. And it also assists them in implementing some of our equity work and some of our science and reading work.
And in his report, he also said that he is continuing to post for the school counselor and school psychologist position. So I just want to make sure that we have funding and that is like marked for this year's budget.
Well, the schools, we have a school psychologist.
Right, and this is saying we're continuing to post for an additional school counselor or school psychologist. So when Mackenzie asked earlier about if we're still hiring, the answer was that we weren't, or at least that's how I took that, and now it's saying that we still are, even though we did hire a BCBA. So my question is, for this year, are we still hiring, as this mentions, and is it in our current budget to have a BCBA, an adjustment counselor and or psychologist, and a school psychologist?
So the school psychologist and the psychologist are the same. We have one currently, and we have the BCBA because we could not find an adjustment counselor.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask it again. So I hear that, but in his report, it says.
I can't speak to exactly what he said in his report, I was reading it aloud, but Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can certainly go back in the budget. The BCBA was because we had no one as an adjustment counselor.
That is correct. We do not have a position budgeted for this year. We're looking to add it into the budget for next year.
So you're not hiring, so it's not posted, we're done looking for additional staff in that area because we have the BCBA right now.
As far as I know, we are not hiring an additional person right now.
So I would ask, Jen, that you clarify that then, please, with Dr. Crean, because it does say in his report that they are.
Yeah, it does, but at the end of the sentence, it actually says for FY25. We will be attempting to address these needs through the ongoing effort to hire a school counselor or an additional school psychologist for FY25.
Okay, so okay, and so that's what is reflected in the
Correct.
therapeutic services, adjustment counselor and BCBA.
That's what he's talking about because he says it right in the report for FY25.
Right, but the first sentence is, we continue to post for a school counselor, psychologist, and we've hired a BCBA. So that's I just am trying to clarify.
And it also, it only has one psychologist listed, but it says we're continuing,
If we couldn't find an adjustment counselor next year, then we would hire a second school psychologist to help support the needs of our children, is what that means. Because this year we advertised for all 3 positions, hoping to get someone to address the mental health and social emotional needs of our students.
So the school adjustment counselor is still posted on our Union 28 employment website. So if we're not continuing with that, can that just be removed?
I will have Pam look at that. I don't do the posting, so I will check in with Pam relative to postings.
Because it specifically says there's one for 2024-25, but there is one currently as well. So there are 2 different job postings, one assuming that it's hiring right now.
and again, I just want to clarify, a school counselor is the same as an adjustment counselor, because it's 2 different things. I want to make sure that's the same position. In the report, it's listed as a school counselor. In our breakdown of employees, it's listed as adjustment counselor. Are those the same thing, just 2 different names, or are those 2 different positions?
Are we looking at the list of staff?
Yep.
Is that what you're asking?
Yep,
Adjustment counselor is what it says.
yep, but in the principal report, it says, in an ongoing effort to hire a school counselor or an adjustment.
I would believe that would be the same, it's just a different name for the same position.
Okay. Anything else for the principal report? Jen?
No.
No?
No,
Oh, I'm done with that, all right. Okay, we're up to the Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Over there with the TV. Okay, maybe. Can you hear me okay?
I think, I don't know if the, yeah,
I just
there you go.
spun it. Okay. All right, so I am here to give you an overview of assessments at Erving. I want to start with some background because I think that there's a lot of heaviness with assessments sometimes, and so it's really important to have the background first. So this is multi-tiered systems of support. The goal would be to have 80 to 90% of students in a class responding to tier 1. So tier 1 would be the teaching that is happening in the classroom from the classroom teacher. So the goal is that 80 to 90% of our students would respond to that, and then we can focus our attention to the other 5 to 10% or the 1 to 5% needing additional interventions. Now, if a student isn't responding, they would go to level or tier 2, needing support, and that would be 5 to 10% of students. That would be the ideal picture. And then if that's not working, then we would respond with a more in-depth intervention, more intensive intervention, and that would be the tier 3, okay? So as we go through the data tonight, it is important to keep this framework in mind because this is the ideal. All right, so as we're looking at data, we want to think about that small schools, it's really tricky. It can sway grade to grade because we have such a small cohort of students. So the goal of looking at data is really to learn from each other and learn from teachers. So that's typically what I do in grade level meetings when we're working on data is what can we learn from each other? What can we capitalize on to support all of our students? And then we want to continue to make sure that students are making progress. So we do progress monitoring regularly and have meetings to look at how they're responding to instruction. So in Union 28, we created this graphic. Staff saw this at the very beginning of the year to just kind of consolidate all of our initiatives that we are working on. So we're continuing to work on having universal design for learning. And through that, we're also building our equity PD to make sure we are being equitable to all students. The content that we're focusing on, and it's not to say math isn't important, but we need to tackle one piece at a time. We're focusing on literacy. And so we've been getting that literacy PD. Some of it's been on Wednesdays, some of it's been on Mondays. There were 10 modules, and we just this week completed our 10th. So we're done with that. Check that off. Check that off the list. Staff, not you, sorry. We have a plan. And then we also want to be mindful of how are we doing inclusion? How are we pushing in and supporting students where it's appropriate to push in? And then for students who need maybe that tier 3 or even tier 2, where is it appropriate to have a student come out of the classroom? Keeping all that in mind, this slide before, if a student is receiving tier 2 or tier 3, it is really, really, really crucial that they're also getting all of tier 1. And that is the tricky thing that we spend a lot of time in figuring out the puzzle pieces to how to make that true for students. So that is what an effective MTSS model looks like. We are doing a lot of work, and teachers are working really hard here on putting some new things in place. Last year, we dove into looking at different reading curriculums and seeing which would be a good match for Erving. The team of teachers ended up deciding that Into Reading was a good match. This year, we're implementing Into Reading. We are working out all of the kinks because with a new program, you have a buffet of resources and you have to figure out what makes the most sense for the students in front of you. So we're working on that. So teachers are working really, really hard, and this data is not to say that they're not doing the right things, okay? Because MCAS is going to show you one thing. We also have local data in here that shows you more in depth, but teachers are working so hard, and we're constantly looking at data. Depending on the snow tomorrow, we have a data meeting scheduled tomorrow afternoon. So I'm hopeful, no pressure, Jen, but I'm hopeful we'll have that meeting. And yeah, so I say that all because I do have concerns about Erving, right? I'm not gonna stand up here and sugarcoat it because it is, we need to make sure we're doing what we need to for all of our students. And I know teachers are working really hard, but how can we do that in a systematic and explicit way with what we're using for teaching? And we're working on that, especially with the new program. So what you're looking on the screen right now is the Union 28 accountability percentiles. So each school district gets a ranking, and so that means that we are scoring better than 25% of the schools in the state of Massachusetts. So that means, in the other way, 75% of schools are scoring better than Erving. Okay? You can see what the schools in our union. I purposely kept some of the data, because it's all public, from the other schools, because while it's helpful to compare to the state, the other side of the state is a little bit different than us in these small rural towns. So I kept many of the other schools' data within this presentation so that you can see more of, okay, here's another school that looks more like us. All right, so this is Erving. So what you're looking at on the screen in the top row, you can see for all students in 2021, 2022, and 2023 how they scored. You'll see that the orange is that partially meeting expectation, so that pretty consistently is above 50% for us. And then you can see that the students meeting expectations is pretty constantly, it has been in the hovering around 25%, right? And we don't have students that have been exceeding expectations. High needs. Superintendent Colquhoun mentioned that in the Student Opportunity Act planning. This is one of the things that we're kind of diving into the data and looking at. High needs is categorized as students with disabilities, low income, and also our multi-language learners. So that high needs category is all of those students that are classified under those classifications are lumped in together to see how that differs. That is the only subcategory we can look at because you have to have a minimum of 20 to be able to look at that. And because we're small, we don't meet the minimums with the exception of that category on the public end of the data. So typically what you see, no matter what school you look at, you typically see that the high needs category does have areas where we need to continue to work on. And you can see that in the not meeting expectations, right? For all students, it was 20%, and you see an increase in the high needs at 34%. So while you see a decrease in the partially meeting, there was an increase in the not meeting. So we need to continue to make sure so that would be students, probably some of those students are students that receive Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. We have to be making sure that they are in Tier 1 and then in addition getting what they need outside of that. So that is ELA. For math, this is where we are as well. There has been a math program in place, investigations. However, the math team is looking at and researching other math programs that are out there in terms of what would make sense and where student needs are in Erving. So that is some work that is happening. But it's very similar, right? We have a really high percentage of students that are partially meeting expectations, and then we have a group that's not meeting. We do have some blue, though, so that's a good thing. And then you see, again, that difference in from 24% meeting for all students, you see it down to 9 for high needs. All right, the next slides, I do have it broken down by grade level, but again, I kept the other schools, so I didn't keep the other schools' graphs because it would be a lot on a page. I did keep the other schools' breakdowns because just having Erving compared to the state, that's one thing. That's including schools out towards Boston, and it just creates a different lens from our rural towns and on this side of the state. So that is there for you to see. You'll see the trends in grade level. And this is not, because we're such a small school, but this is all public information. This is not to say one teacher is doing something over the other teacher. It takes the entire building to make a impact on student learning. So this is not to say one grade is not doing what they need to do, because we all need to figure out how effectively use our program so that we can then impact student learning more, because there are good things happening. Here is 4th grade. And while I have these up on the screen, there were a couple of questions. Mark, I appreciate you sending me those questions ahead of time. There were a couple of questions that we had. One was, how does students opting out of the test affect our accountability rating? And from what I have found, it only affects us if we have less than 95% participation. And I don't think we have had that. Where it does affect our accountability rating is attendance in general. So not just attendance to the test, but attendance in general. So when we have chronically absent kids, which is 10% or more of the school year, then that can impact our score. And I believe you want to get 4 points for attendance, and I believe this year we got 0 for Erving. So that's not, you want to get, in order for it to impact your score overall, you want the points, and we didn't get any, meaning we have many students that are chronically absent. So that's another impact that can play a role in MCAS land and accountability scores. I have 5th grade. And then 6th grade. So again, this comes out a year later, so this is last year's cohort. Okay, so remember this MTSS triangle, right? Ideally, we want 80 to 90% of students, what is happening in Tier 1 is working. This is all hot off the press, current, just finished ELA data. Thank you, Wendy and Melissa, for all your assessing. So there are some highlights in here, okay? I'm going to point them out because there is a lot of red, okay? So one highlight is, and I've purposely mixed these all up. They're actually in order based on the high risk percentage in the middle of year. So the top line is beginning of year scores. The bottom line is middle of year scores. Each of these bars is a different grade level, but they are in order by the high risk red bar on the bottom. So I did not attach grades to this because I feel like in these small schools, we want to respect student confidentiality, and I think that is important. So one big positive that I see in looking at this is in the beginning of the year, this grade had 55% of the class in the high risk category. And now, having finished the assessments, that number is now down to 15. There still is 23% in the some risk, but they have lessened the amount of students that are in that risk area by whatever this percentage is. I don't have it in my head right now. Okay, so there, and you see that in a few of the grades, right? So you see that lessening, or the blue and the green is getting bigger in the middle of the year. You see that happening here, okay? But that is a highlight, but we definitely have work that we still need to do, right? You can see other areas where the green and the blue is staying exactly the same, right? So there was a little bit of change in the red, probably as one student moved from being in the high risk category to the some risk category, but we didn't make any movement in here.
So I know you haven't attached grade levels to this, and that's fine, but you and the rest of and the staff know what grade levels these should be.
Yeah.
So explain or talk to us a little bit about, for instance, the grade level, like at the one very much at the bottom, right? Where that red has stayed almost exactly the same. It's a little hard to see from this angle, but pretty much the same. Or the one third from the bottom where the red is actually increased. Talk to us about what conversations you're having with those grade levels about those results.
So that is like really current process. We met today, Principal Crane and the two reading specialists and I, to talk about, okay, what is our data meeting process going to look like? So I'm running, hopefully, if it's not safe, Jen, though, it's okay. Tomorrow we are going through and we're looking at not only this data, but we're also looking at behind the scenes the growth data, because there are some students, let's say this grade for instance, there are some students that are still in this red bar, but in our new assessment system that we're using, Amplify this year, it does attach growth measures for each individual student. And then it will say this amount of growth that they made is well above average. So then if I have a student who is in the high risk category here and in the high risk category here, but they made well above average growth, how can I ask a student to make any more than well above average, right? So tomorrow, we are gonna dive into looking at what did the student growth look like, right? Because it's one thing to say, okay, they're here, they're there, but how have they been responding to the instruction? And then if they are responding, what are we doing that's working well for that group of students? And if they're not responding, or they also label below growth, right? So a student isn't making a lot of growth. What can we change? What do we change for that? Because there needs to be something that we change, and that could be what the tier 1 small group looks like, and making sure that tier 2 is 25 minutes. That could be, in another school, one of the things they've done is the classroom teacher has added a 10-minute little mini intervention at the very beginning of the day for a small group of students, and it's really targeted. So it's kind of changing. If they're not responding, it's changing and supporting them with what that student needs. And so yes, all the teachers tomorrow will know what their class looks like and what they need.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, but, so that's a reasonable explanation for the bottom one, but again, the third up, where you're seeing it going the other direction, again, I'm curious about that, because that wouldn't be.
But don't forget, the target's still moving, right? So let's say they needed to read 30 words in a minute in the fall. And then in the winter, I don't have the benchmarks. We don't even know what grade this is. I don't even have it memorized. I purposely mixed it all. But then the target is now 50. So, they could have, these 4 students or 3 students could have made progress going from 25 words. Maybe they're at 35 words, but they're still way below the benchmark. So it's continually moving.
Right, I understand the target's always moving, but again, that third one up, that's more, are you saying that's the same number of kids from top to bottom line? Or am I misunderstanding? My understanding is that the bottom longer red would be more students. So more students have now in the red, right?
Yes.
So students were in the yellow, have now moved into the red. So they're regressing, or they're doing worse than
They're not necessarily. I think there's probably one student in looking at the data who truly has regressed, in that their number was 67 and they went back to 52.
So they're not so they're not progressing
this
then.
Wouldn't be a regression.
But
More
they're
than
not
likely, this is because of the target is moving.
Yep, but they're not progressing, right?
Right.
So they now fall into the red because they're not progressing.
It depends. No, you can talk. It depends, because if they it also depends on what grade we're talking about, because if you're in a lower grade, it's easier to make more progress quickly with all of the interventions in place. But if that target is moving, it does not mean that student regressed, because if they started with 5 words per minute And the
I
target
don't think I should
was-
have used the word regress, so that's not what
No,
I
no,
meant.
no.
It
If
just
the
didn't make
target was
progress.
30, right, and that student was at 5, they were definitely in that high-risk category. But then if a student, then if that benchmark was then 47, and they made progress and they only got to 20, they're still gonna be in that
They're gonna
high
fall in the
risk,
red,
but
yeah.
but they've made, I don't remember the numbers I said, but 15 words per minute
Yeah.
in progress.
So how often are these data meetings or whatever you're having tomorrow done? Because I think, again, a great snapshot. When we were looking at MCAS numbers, though, for several years, it wasn't just, you know, a one-off year. It was pretty consistently lower than even our neighbors, our other 3 towns in our union. So what I guess what I want to hear is what is the plan to reverse that, at least slow it, right, and reverse it going forward, because we have so many more resources available in this district than in the other 3, but we don't seem to be making the gains that the other 3 are. So where's the disconnect? And then once that's identified, what is the plan to close that gap?
Well, I think one of the disconnects has been that there hasn't been, with the exception of math, there wasn't a systematic reading program in place, right?
But
So there
math
was-
isn't great numbers
correct,
either.
Correct. But there hasn't been something for reading in place, right? And this is all the reading data.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we vertically align, because there's only one grade of each class for the most part, how can we vertically align our language? I was in a walkthrough where one class called a silent E, like in the word lake, a silent E word. The next class called it a VCE word, and the next class called it a magic E word. And so how confusing is that for a student who needs extra opportunities and extra support with learning these rules, for them year after year to figure out what does this teacher call this, and what does this teacher call this? So that's the importance of having some sort of systematic, vertically aligned reading program. So, and it is a lot of work to implement a new reading program, a lot. So I feel like we're in year 1. Right? We're in year 1, and so
Yep.
it's gonna take time to roll that out, right? We have to get our feet wet with all of those pieces. But we're also taking all of the PD we've gotten and slowly are working on what small group instruction would look like
And part of that
for
are
students.
those grade level meetings and
Right,
classroom
right.
visits. And you're having data conversations as the curriculum and instruction director, but the staff is having those conversations all the time.
Right.
The reading interventionists are having conversations with classroom teachers,
And
so it's constant.
To answer your other question, we're having organized, look at the data picture, record how students are responding. We're doing that 5 times in the year. So we have the beginning, the middle, and the end of the year. And then within those 2 timeframes in between, we have 2 more times where we look.
And so I think that's really easy to see, sorry, Mark, for the reading, the ELA program, right? So that makes sense. We didn't have something, now we do.
Right.
What about the math program that we did have and we've had for several years?
So that is harder. Well, MCAS will speak to it. However, MCAS is one data point. That data, so I have the beginning of year. I did the same thing. These are each of our classes, and that's broken up into how they scored over the course of the beginning of year assessment, but we are finishing up. The math window is a little bit different than the reading. So I don't have the comparison on how students are progressing with that.
But I'm gonna make Mark so mad. But I'm trying to be gently pushing back. I'm not trying to, because you weren't here for the math decision. But the points that you're making about the reason why we need the English Language Arts program curriculum is the reason also why we got the math curriculum.
Yeah.
And so vertically aligned, everybody on the same page, using the same language, and yet we're not seeing the change in the math scores. So
So some of the work we're doing is looking at DESE and what they are saying are high-quality programs, and some of the programs we in Massachusetts have used in the past have not been rated as high-quality programs. And so that's some of our conversation about looking at mathematics curriculum across Union 28. What are vetted as high-quality programs, and how can we bring those programs to the school? Which is why we brought our reading program and we did all the work on the science of reading. We're trying to do that in mathematics as well across the state, and the state is also looking deeply at programs.
Right, right. But it's not to say that math isn't important. However, to drop 2 new programs, like if we were to do that, which we're not doing that.
Yes, and I'm not asking to do that.
No, but to do that, like, that wouldn't make sense, right? Because it takes so much time and effort in rolling out and implementing a new curriculum. It's because they give you the menu of everything you could possibly need for all of your students, and you then have to go through it, figure out what works best, and then go in there.
Right, so I'm just using math.
Do you
as
remember
an-
what year the math curriculum was?
that we
put in
implemented
here?
investigations?
Yeah.
I don't. Do you guys
Before I
remember?
came
It
here.
was a while ago.
And I think we're getting a little bit
Yeah.
off track on the data. I don't know if you have some more slides to
No,
finish.
but what I'm trying to get at though is, what I'm trying to understand is, going forward, what is in place? The data meetings are in place, but I'm reflecting back on the math, which was highly, when we chose it, it was considered a good math program at the time, right? But our MCAS scores really haven't moved. And so I understand that we now have a new ELA program.
But I think PD with the program also matters.
And that's
right?
what's
So
in place that wasn't
with ELA, I've been, I would say almost monthly, having implementation meetings with the staff to support them where they're at in terms of implementing. And I wasn't here, so I can't
Right.
speak to what the PD in the rollout, right?
But
You
what's in
can't just
place
drop
now
a
is
new math.
you, right? We have a curriculum and instruction director.
Right.
We have high-quality
We have a data
curriculum,
meeting process.
and we have scientifically researched professional development to support staff. And we have you going into classrooms to support staff as well. So all of that is in place.
And it's not just me saying we're gonna get this, or the team last year picking that ELA program. It's not a magic fix, right? We have students where we need to meet all learners, and we need to be using effective science-based instruction. And it is a change from where many schools, including Erving, were instructing.
I want to make sure Mark has a chance to talk.
Yeah, two things.
Yes,
One
and then I'm
is-
gonna need water, so.
Yeah. One is, as I understand it, the top tier were essentially not classroom, the whole classroom interventions, the top little part of the triangle. And the question is, in my mind, when you describe that other program where the teacher was doing something with a small group at the beginning of the day or something, you know, what effort is going into that kind of, you know, special thing for, those small groups that may not be performing the way you want? So that's my first question. You know, how much effort is going into working down below the 80 to 90% portion of the instruction, and how much is going into that tier 3 assistance or support?
Well, but I think part of the trick is that 80 to 90% isn't us. With the exception of one class, this class, right? They're at 88% are in where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Every other class, we're not in a place where we're saying that the 80 to 90% is working. So that's why we have to focus on tier 1. It's not to say tier 2 and tier 3 we're not working on, because after the data meetings, we then roll out, okay, which students need intense intervention, and how is that going to happen, and how is that going to happen in addition to what they're getting at the tier 1 level. Because now Whereas before, there was a lot of, and this is not just Erving, there was a lot of instead of, right? They need tier 2 supports, they need extra supports, so they got that instead of, or while the tier 1 was happening. And now the research is saying, in order to give kids the opportunity to close that gap, right? Also known as what was previously the achievement gap, it's not the kids weren't achieving, we weren't giving kids the opportunity to be part of that whole class. We were making the decision as educators, well, I didn't make that decision as for everyone, but we as educators were making that decision to then take them out of tier 1 and do this other thing instead, when really they need both. So those tier 2 and tier 3 interventions are happening, but look at the amount of students that we need to intervene for. So really it then becomes, how are we supporting tier 1? And that was, we didn't have an effective research-based program. It didn't exist here. And now we're starting with that. And it takes, I think the numbers now are 3 to 5 years to implement and to have it up and running. I work with other schools that are on year 3 of implementation, and they're finally feeling like, oh, this is how it's supposed to feel. So it takes time, and if I had a magic wand to fix it all, I would, but it takes time.
The only other thing I will say is that when I watch the presentations here, when I've read the presentations that I've picked up before and the stuff that at the supervisory meetings that we've gotten, I feel really good. And I feel like, it's going to fix it. But I don't have something to say to the doubting Thomases, as it were, or those people who come to me as parents and say, why isn't Erving working as well as it ought to? Mm-hmm. Why isn't it doing as well as it used to do? And, they don't go to those other meetings and they don't see the packets that I've looked at of your stuff and hear the encouraging words, I don't think. And I'm not sure how to communicate that to them. So, I don't know, can you say something to me or to the speaker there, the show there, that, that I can use for those people who feel that things are not as good as they were? I could ask them to talk to teachers and talk to teachers in the school, or talk to the principal and get a clue there, or get more involved in the school in some way, and maybe that would help. I'm not sure, but what can you say?
I think some of that is philosophical too, because the target has moved, right? Many teachers, like I used to teach first grade, so many teachers I've worked with say, oh, the first grade is now like we're teaching second grade. And so it's in kindergartners, it's like we're teaching first grade. So I think there has been changes in what we're expecting of students.
We're making the
but
question.
they are able, I've seen it, they're able to meet those expectations with a clear tier 1 effective program in place. And teachers here are doing a great job sifting through all of the components of a new program. It is a lot. So that is not to say that they're not doing what they need to. They are, but it takes time. So give us the time if that's what you want to hear.
That's the best I can say. As I say, it's not me. It's people coming to me and saying these things.
Yeah, but I think I can say that I sit in as many data meetings here as I possibly can because of where we're at, and I think the work is being done to meet and to get those students that are needing extra opportunities, right? It's not that they can't achieve, it's that they need more opportunities given to them to achieve, and that's happening. So.
Are there any other schools within the district using the same ELA program?
Yes, Leverett also is in their first year of implementation too.
And no one else is using it besides Erving and Leverett? Like when you were referring to year 3, it's just year 3 in a different program?
Yeah, and elsewhere, just from other experiences.
And then just so if I'm understanding you correctly, it's part of your role to monitor and make sure that the educators are in this school, well, in all the schools, are using the new curriculum to fidelity. So that's part of your role, is to do the training with them, to go in and watch how they're doing, and pick up on those nuances of like, yeah, we used to call that, the bossy or the magic-y or whatever you want, but now within this program, it's saying that these are the keywords that we're using. Friendly reminder, let's refer back to that vocabulary and move forward. Like, that's going to be part of that hard learning curve.
I would say her role is supportive, to support
Yeah.
staff. It's not evaluative. That's what
Yeah.
the principal does evaluate.
Yeah, and rolling out and working with the principal on that. But I will say, because we're in a union that has 4 schools, and not all 4 of those schools are using the same. Last year when I started, they weren't really using the same anything. And so it is a big celebration to have Leverett and Erving be using the same, and that just happened, like, out of the 2 schools ended up having teams of people who picked that program, right? But it's in terms of, if you think about larger districts where all 4 schools would have the same program, we could then have the company come in and do a larger PD for that group. Now, that's not always the best case scenario, but there are different options. When we have smaller, there's only one of me, right? And so me getting into the classrooms, into the schools, when there's 3 different ELA programs happening, and supporting each teacher, it's really a balance of doing that.
So then
That's why those implementation meetings on Wednesday afternoons are really important, and grade levels.
and are the principals being trained or kind of informed in these different programs, specifically the ELA, like new curriculum of like when you are then going in the classrooms and evaluating or monitoring or helping support your educators in your classroom?
She also
to do
supports the
that?
principals as well, and the principals participated in the Hill for Literacy
Mm-hmm.
Science of Reading training, which isn't a program, but it's the research around how we teach students to read. The program is our tool.
Right, I guess I'm just trying to
Right.
identify who are the different people that these educators can go to for support, to get assistance, to make sure that they're able to use and be super successful and feel successful using this new
They know they
curriculum.
can
And
reach out to the
I think-
principal, our
yeah.
curriculum director.
And we also are doing
other.
walkthroughs for literacy and equity to monitor how the progress because each building has something new that they've taken on. So, right, for Erving, it's into reading.
And we share feedback at the school level with each school and across Union 28.
Right.
And this ELA program is K through 6, right?
Yes, yep. Some are not, but yes, this one is. Any other questions?
Thanks, Lindsay.
Can
No
you
problem.
share this presentation with us? Because I think I only have the one that is from Joint Supervisory.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for being here tonight.
No problem. My 2.5-year-old did want to come.
Well, hopefully the 2.5-year-old is in bed.
I hope so.
It is 8:41.
Thank you.
All right, Budget and Personnel Committee report. Do you have any? Union 28 Committee report. You want to talk about Union 28?
No, I'm not prepared. I didn't take adequate notes to do that. I could dig around and find an agenda and go back through it, but
The main part is that you're well into the
Oh, yeah.
superintendent search.
Yeah, the superintendent search is now out in public session with 3 candidates. It's all in the newspaper, so people should have read that.
The finalists.
So from here on out, it's the supervisory committee doing things. I think I can say that I'm part of the group of 3 that's supposed to go out and visit the candidates, and I don't think we have anything else decided at this point, and the dates have not been set for that.
We're organizing the final public meeting for all 3 candidates, and we're organizing the candidates' visits to Union 28 schools, as well as the site visits to the candidates' places of employment.
Great.
And that goes through the Joint Supervisory Committee Chair and the Search Committee.
And then more data just from Lindsay was shared about different things, right? You shared more data last night. I'm not imagining that.
No, you're not.
Okay.
You did see the ELA data was from some of
That
the
was what was
page
shared
stuff.
last night, yeah. So some of this, a lot of this data is shared at the Joint Supervisory Committee meeting with all of the schools listed and kind of see that big picture, which is great. So I appreciate seeing all of that.
Good. All right, anything else for that?
No.
All right. Old business. Do we have any old business? Just double checking. Jen, do you have an update on the 7D van driver position?
No.
Has there been any applicants?
Principal Crane is, I think, working with Karina around the 70 van drivers. I believe there were 2, the last I spoke to them.
2 applicants? And you said they're moving forward through that process?
As far as I know, yes.
Do you have any idea when we might have an update on that?
No, I can reach out to Principal Crane and ask.
Okay. All right, so we have, under new business, we have the 2025, the fiscal year 2029 Beacon Mobility / FM Kosmeskis 5-year transportation contract. That's our contract for busing. Caitlin, do you want to say anything about that?
Sure, it's a collective bid with many of the other school districts in the area. It's on the special town meeting. There's an article on January 31st. So what we need tonight is a vote for the chair to sign the contract if it passes through the town.
Yeah. So, just for those at home, it went out to bid for our transportation. There is no competition. Kosmeskis was the only bid received, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so there's, again, no other bid. So, but because they want it as a 5-year contract, it has to go before a special town meeting to have the voters agree or approve a 5-year contract versus a typical 3-year contract. So what we can do is vote it tonight, contingent on the voters on the 31st approving the 5-year contract. So it wouldn't fully be put into place until after the January 31st special town meeting vote approving the 5-year contract portion of it. So that was in our packets. So, Caitlin, the one question I had was what is, or is the number that they gave, the 609,126, Erving, or is it Union 28?
That was for Erving and New Salem Wendell combined. The amount for Erving's it's a 2-tier, 3-bus, 2 tiers, meaning that the buses run first through the secondary students and then to the elementary, is $260,064.
I'm gonna ask you to say it again. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
$260,064.
60. 200.
So that's elementary and secondary.
And secondary.
So this contract has to be approved by us by our town by Wendell, New Salem, and their towns.
Yes, and Gil Montague and Pioneer and Greenfield and a few others, the tech school. Yep, so everyone has to. For the regional school districts, they can pass it just at the school committee level, but for municipal districts like this one, and also for New Salem Wendell, even though they are a regional district, it has to go through the towns because the towns do the transportation.
And I just want to clarify, what the special town meeting is just to approve the fact that it's 5 years, not to approve the dollar amount. The special town, voters of the town have to approve the fact that it's going to be for 5 years, not the 200,000, I'm sorry, whatever the number was that you said, I don't want to say it wrong. So just to clarify. And also to clarify that Kosmeskis is the only busing company around. So while it has to be approved by all those, I don't know what everybody else is going to do if they don't approve it.
Yeah, it was the only bid we received. So, we do have other transportation companies that some of our other schools use, but Kosmeskis has historically been the only bid that we get in this collective bid.
So, no competition. So, that's where we're at. I'm going to ask Caitlin one more time to give me that number because I...
260
260
and $64. 260,064.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That being said, are we ready to take a vote to approve the bid for school transportation in the amount of $260,064? Yes, thank you.
Pending.
5-year contract.
For a 5-year contract pending approval at special town meeting for the 5-year contract, yep.
And authorize you to sign it.
Yeah, and authorize, so, I mean, ideally the chair, but if you choose to do it a different way, you can put that out there.
So moved.
Is that clear?
It's good enough.
So the amount of money, the awarding of the bid, and the chair signing off on that award, pending a 5-year contract being approved at at special town meeting, sorry. Is that clear to everybody?
That's clear.
All right. Any other discussion, or do we need a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion?
No.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you for that. All right, so we're up to the budget discussion and potential vote. So there were a lot of questions asked last month. Did you, Caitlin, want to start with anything, or are you?
Notice anything that I changed. So I watched the meeting and went along with it with the budget, looked for kind of consensus of the committee to make changes in anything that is, well, on my computer it was kind of a lovely light blue color, but it's kind of that gray in the notes column. Those are changes that I made since the last meeting that you had. Or just notes on why a change wasn't made. So for instance, some of the lines for professional development contracted services, since we've been relying on ESSER money for that in the past couple of years, we decided to keep that at the 15,000. I think we had reduced it in the meeting previous, but not reduce it any further due to a reliance that we've had on ESSER. Same thing for instructional supplies, line 53. We chose to keep that the same because we're losing the ESSER funding for next year. We won't have it to cover some of the additional instructional supplies that we have been using it for. So I made, as part of the director's report I sent, it kind of outlines that. The major drivers of the budget, ESSER money will run out on 9th, well, not run out, we have to expend it by September 30th, 2024. This will impact the adjustment counselor position currently being paid through ESSER, supplies and materials, contracted services, and stipends. Another major driver is the need for an additional mental health professional. That was the BCBA position that we had talked about earlier, which I believe we'll have to, we're budgeting it for it now, but because it is an additional position to the school, I think the school committee will need to vote on that before the end of the school year to allow for an additional position. And we made a policy change last year. Another unknown is the Unit B contract negotiations. It's happening this year. The new 5-year bus contract, but our percent increase remained low even despite these things because of if we have a school-run special education transportation and that's successful, then we would see a reduction of roughly $78,160 to that line. And those are the Erving Elementary budget drivers. For Erving Secondary, it was given updated information from Gil Montague that it sees a decrease in special education tuition and the new 5-year transportation contract as well. So,
Do you know quickly, just so I don't have to look through, where the transportation line is?
for secondary or
No, elementary,
line 72.
72, thank you.
And I promise next time you see the budget, I can take out the notes and everything will get bigger. So when that column's removed, it'll be a little easier to read.
And is there any expectation that we are going to need to fund, I know we've asked this a couple of times, to fund any portion of the health insurance benefits for our employees from the town?
I have not heard from the town that they would like us to cover those benefits. I know it's been in discussion and I've heard of it, but there's been no request as far as I know.
To budget for that, Scott?
I believe the last I heard was there was, Jen had mentioned that there was sufficient funds based on the current staffing. If there was additional hires,
Okay.
there would be an issue. I'd have to confirm that with the treasurer, but I believe that's the last thing that I heard.
Yeah, so we'll have to check in on that additional mental health position,
Yes.
whether that's gonna be, whether that was factored in or not.
Okay.
To that.
Because the real question is, going forward into the next budget year, would the benefits be rolled into our budget or kept in the town budget? Because I'd heard that that might be.
It's a larger discussion that I don't have the answer for.
And this budget still has the grants taken, not included in it, correct?
So the grants are listed as a revenue source. So for instance, if we have, let's say, line 111, the IDEA 240 grant, it's listed as a revenue of 50,000. And then if we have a salary position that we can use that grant for, then that gets taken off the budget, and that's why there is a reduction to the overall cost of the town, because we remove it from the budget you see here in the line, and it's paid for through a grant.
The superintendent's salary looks like it was just moved up as a standard increase. Did you look at the suggested range of salaries that was advertised for the new superintendent's position?
So that budget was passed back in November, the Union 28 budget, which was before the process started.
But the advertisement had already gone out with that, with those numbers.
I think the creation of it was in September, October.
So the answer would be no? No,
So it was not adjusted for what the, and I think it's roughly around where the I'd have to double check on what what it was advertised at, but I believe it's roughly the same.
I mean, it could be higher, it could be lower is my only thought. Good. Not quite sure yet.
Has the principal signed a contract
Yes,
at this rate?
yes.
And this contract, I know, I don't know if it was a couple years ago, we increased the principal's hours to go through the summer, and so that is covered with this new contract as well.
We increased the permanent principal position. The hours of the interim position are slightly different than the permanent position contract. It's an interim contract.
So is this then prorated for those hours?
This is based on the hours that are in the contract. I don't have it with me, but that's the salary that the principal will be getting for next year.
So
It
it's
is not the same as the previous principal's calendar year.
So the question is, will the principal be working during the summer? Well, at any point, I'm thinking of the nursery school,
preschool?
preschool, yes, pardon me. I'm old. Yeah, the preschool, and the policy that, he's responsible for that, process now. And so if he's going to be working it during that time when most of those individuals would be coming forward, or not, and we're setting it all up.
So
He has an allotted number of days in the contract, but again, it's not the exact same contract as the 3-year contract for the previous principal.
okay, but the 3-year contract from the previous principals was, according to this budget, somewhere 91,740, right? Was 2022 actual, right? And we're up to 101,000 for budgeted for the fiscal year 25, and you're telling us that he's not working the same, he's working less days. So what I'm asking is, why wasn't that prorated to reflect the fact that he's not working the same number of days that a 3-year contracted principal would?
It's also based on principal experience, prior experience.
Okay, why wouldn't you want him working the same number of days over the summer, since this will be his 2nd year?
In negotiations with the principal for this next year, we arrived at an allotted number of hours for his final year as interim principal.
And can you send me that contract, please?
Mm-hmm.
So the line on the preschool, there's just that one line in there, and it says principal or his designee, and could that person be named, right at the beginning of whatever limitations there are on his days?
Certainly
So that-
the principal, if the principal was unable to respond, would assign a designee.
I just want to make sure there's coverage throughout
Absolutely.
the year on that issue.
Right, and at the beginning of the year, it seemed to be a confusion that that fell under the principal, so I guess just making sure that the principal is aware that that is their responsibility.
And there was also the discussion where it was 1 or 2 preschools, and we hadn't arrived at that decision at that time. So hopefully we are arriving at the decision, we're either having 1 or 2 preschools, and then we would know the amount of students in each preschool, or how many students would be in one.
So who do you envision the designee being? There are programs that happen over the summer that somebody's got to be in charge of the building during. So if he's not working those hours over the summer, who would be the designee?
I can check in with the principal and then with the new superintendent.
I mean, I think it would fall under the new superintendent's responsibilities at that point.
Since we brought up preschool, can I jump there? Okay.
Yeah.
So I saw that kindergarten and preschool registration went out in the newsletter on Dojo. I think it's been posted on Facebook. What does that process look like, and at what point is a decision going to be made on how many preschools will be needed? Because it seems like in this FY25 budget, there are currently 2 preschool teachers budgeted. However, this second preschool teacher that was hired under a 1-year role as preschool. So what is that process going to look like? When will we have an answer to know if we're going to need this preschool budgeted or not budgeted?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, last year when we had this discussion, the school committee felt it was their purview relative to deciding the programming for preschool. So if you just give me your recommendation or request, we can certainly adjust the budget.
Well, but that's based on some information, the bulk of which was the number of students. So we need that information in order to make that informed decision.
Right, we don't have that information currently.
I would suggest that it's actually, you know, your bailiwick to come up with those numbers and say what's needed. Or going forward, if it's only a 1-year position, you know, the new superintendent would be coming up to us and saying, this is what we need. I don't think it should fall in between, you know, different places where somebody can come forward and get more than one answer. Particularly, they can get one from your office, one from maybe hearing us, one from talking to their neighbor on the street, and that
So
kind
until
of
we have
confusion.
registration, and as you know, for anyone who deals with early childhood, registrations come in over the summer, so I wouldn't have any exact numbers. I think other schools in Union 28 only have 1 preschool, and they have up to 19 or 20 or 21 students. And I believe that was a point of discussion for the school committee last year. So the school committee can directly say, we will accept any amount of preschool students in 1 class, or we would like to have 2 if it goes over that amount. But again, we won't know that number until well into the summer, so I can't give you an exact number. And
No, I
registration
wasn't
just went out.
asking for an exact
Right,
number now.
But registration used to run where there was a date by which you had to have your child registered by, with few exceptions. And so is that not the case going forward? That there is a date with which the registrations need to be in by?
I don't have that information tonight.
So it says all registration packets are due by March 11th. However, there is not any information regarding if you turn it in late or if you choose not to enroll and wait till after March 11th, what the circumstances would be. But
There was a procedure that was created.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just saying on this, this is all I have access to.
right.
Is what went out was that all registration packets are due by March 11th.
So, you know, within a week after that, we should have a fairly good idea of what the number is if their due date is March 11th.
Well, I think we should wait on it beyond that because, you know, people do move to town, you know, later than that, than March. There may be something else coming up, so I would think this whole discussion can take place, you know, say in April.
I mean, yes and no. We need to budget for it or not budget for it. We can keep it in as a placeholder with the understanding that if we decide not to need it, we just take those funds out. But I mean, we do need to make some sort of a decision for our budget, whether we're budgeting for 2 positions or not. And then there is a time with which the employees need to know whether they're going to
Absolutely.
continue to stay employed or not. So
if March 11th is the registration date, which is a Monday, that would allow before our March meeting for information, or at our March meeting, information be reported. So if we can get the number of preschool children that are registered by our March meeting, that would be great. Along with, I know Gillian keeps record. She does a great job of investigating to see how many children in that age range are residing in town by looking at different records, the census and everything else. So I would love to see the information that she has for preschool on how many projected preschoolers are currently in Erving that we could potentially have, and the number of children that are registered, to at least give us some general numbers. Because I know when I was looking at census information last year, one of the reasons why we chose to have a 1-year position for this year was because there was a significant decrease in numbers, more dramatically than what we ran into this year. So this year we thought we had 12, we had about 6 move in, there were some needs, there were some concerns, and that's what drove that second classroom, where I don't remember exact numbers, but say instead of 12, it might have been only like 4 or 5 that were coming in. In this other class is a smaller too, so I think it gave us maybe the most at 10, and that gave us a lot more wiggle room, knowing that additional children could come in over the summer and still feel confident with 1 classroom. So I think that was a lot of our thought process at the beginning. So it would be super helpful to kind of see who has registered, what are those.
Could you put that in an email to me,
Yep,
please?
absolutely. I wrote myself a note too.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And then just kind of, it can give us some general information on what that looks
Absolutely.
like, knowing like, are we really close, or do we have enough wiggle room and feel confident?
go ahead, Scott.
I have a few questions, but just Caitlin, if you could follow up. I was trying to find, when you mentioned that it looks like the FY25 request.
Can you just step
Sorry,
right up to
was
the,
for 2 preschool teachers. What line item? Because I cannot find it in the
So
FY.
we requested a breakdown of within the line item. So line item, classroom teachers' salaries, regular ed,
Okay,
which,
that's all I wanted to know.
101.
I just
Okay.
want to know which one it was embedded in.
so,
It's embedded in
yeah,
regular
so then we
classroom.
asked for like a breakdown. And so within that, there are 2 preschool classrooms.
Okay.
Or
And Caitlin
preschool
does have a
teachers.
document that says Erving Elementary budgeted positions FY25. I think that's what they're
Got
referring
it.
to rather
I
than
was
the
looking
budget.
at the budget document, which doesn't break it down like that. I can send it to you. Thank you very much.
Perfect. I think that was the
Because looking at the
confusion.
expenditure report, preschool salary is broken out as
Yes.
its own line
Yeah.
item, so I was trying to reconcile the two.
And we have, I think the teachers had asked to, just a list of
Okay,
budgeted
perfect.
positions.
Thank you very much.
So Caitlin will send that to you.
Whenever you're, I do have other follow-up questions, but. you're
Come on up.
good. So just based on the earlier discussion at 6 o'clock for capital improvement, there was a request of the school committee to at least look at, see if there is any potential funding source to help with just the initial engineering piece of it, if there's anything there. If not, we can, look elsewhere. So I was trying to reconcile, we were told at the meeting that FY24 has been encumbered for salaries. And so that number should be accurate as far as what the projection for leftover is. So comparing the FY25 request with the FY24 projections, just salaries only. Preschool salary, classroom teachers, specialist teacher salaries for regular, specialist teacher salaries for SPED, library teacher, and psychologist salaries. Apples to apples, 24, you're looking at an end of year balance of plus 181. You're also looking at, for those same line items, an increase request of $33,931. Those are rough estimates. I didn't get down to the single dollar. If we're projecting $181,000 surplus, how can we justify a $33,000 increase? To me, it looks like it should be a reduction of about $150,000 for those 5 line items to balance it out, so.
Yeah, we have had some changes in personnel that have, what we budgeted for FY '24 is a little bit different than what it's gonna be for FY '25. Because I go through every single person in the building and put what their lane, step, and what the amount contractually is gonna be. We also don't know what the Unit B salary is
It's
gonna
not
be.
Unit B.
Oh, just to the teachers
Those
ones,
are
yep.
just Unit A that are, because Unit B are hourly, so we can't encumber accurately because they can take time off unpaid, there's all sorts of different things that can happen, so
Right.
it's just Unit A salaries. So
Yeah.
that's why I was bringing up those.
And if you want to send me an email with that question,
Sure.
I can look into it more thoroughly.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And then just while we're on the topic of classroom teachers or staff salaries, we have budgeted for FY '25 2 second grade classrooms, but is that really supposed to be 2 third grade classrooms, knowing that second grade is split now and that the goal is to have them split next year? Or is there going to really be 2 second grades?
I would assume so, but I don't make that decision.
Okay.
It's more, when I look at the budget, when I did that, it's more of what do we have right now that we would assume is going to remain in position.
So with a decision like that, because I don't like to assume that everything is just gonna stay the same, when
So I think
is
what,
a
yeah, I
decision
think what
made from
Caitlin
the
did
building?
here is just, those are people, but we don't put people down, we put positions, so we'll have to go back and exactly delineate what will happen.
Right, so-
But those are people that we currently have.
Right, and so I guess my question is, when will we find out for budgetary purposes if that class is going to continue to be split or if they're making a new decision for that class?
As it stands, we haven't received any decision different than what we put here, but we can certainly ask a clarifying question about that for the next meeting.
And we should definitely get that cleared. Something really, in the overall picture, rather minor, down at the line on field trips, I offered to pitch in, $2,000 towards field trips to keep things at the level they had been, and we have not met, so I can't promise that until that's voted by the Conservation Commission.
When are you doing meet?
It'll be next month. We didn't have a quorum this month, so it'll be next month.
Okay.
First Tuesday. In the library. A lot of nice pictures around the wall.
Yeah, it's a nice place to meet, isn't it? So one of the things that you had talked about, Caitlin, early on was that the goal was, or a potential goal was to take the grants out of the budget and have them for other uses. And I would like to know what would the percentage be in the overall budget if those grants were put back in the way that they have been for several years now?
Okay, I can look into that for you.
Right, so just so I'm sure that I'm reading this right, so Caitlin, the anticipated, so the grants, total 188,000, am I
Yes.
reading that correctly? So that 188,000 would go back into our operating budget because that, all of those were previously put in our operating budget, correct?
Yeah, so those grants have always been kind of accounted for in the revenue section on the budget summary.
Okay.
So last year it was 192,658. This year, 188,000.
Yeah, I did notice that, but I just wanted to make sure that I was clear that all of those grants had previously been integrated into the budget, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I'll make sure I'm reading that right, or understanding that. And then the other question I had just was on the food service. We heard from, again, I think it was Gil Montague said in the report that they had a surplus because of the grant, that all breakfasts and lunches were free. I'm noticing in the year-to-date budget that you give us, that food service has not used their budget. And again, I'm wondering if that is because of this grant, and if so, does that affect that line going forward?
So in previous years, I got the history of it from Brian Smith, but in previous, dating back a couple years ago, they started to do the food service line a little bit differently. In all of our other districts, that line remains until the end of the school year, which is when we make a transfer of whatever the revolving account needs to get back into the positive and to be sustainable. For the past couple of years, and I can't remember the reason, but it was just, should have been a one-off. A salary was being taken out of that line, and that's why it looked like in previous years we were running down that line. In talking to Brian, we both agreed that it makes more sense for us to leave that line until the end of the year and then transfer in.
I'm sorry, transfer it to where?
Transfer the revolving fund.
Transfer it into the revolving fund?
Yes, going from the line in the local budget at the end of the year.
Yep.
We'll look at the health of the revolving fund and transfer the funds necessary to make the revolving fund
The general
sustainable.
revolving fund, not
The
a
food service revolving fund.
The food service revolving fund.
Everything, every expenditure, every salary, every purchase comes out of the revolving fund right now. And so what we will do at the end of the year is find out how healthy that fund is. And if there is a deficit, and usually typically there is, because we've been using the general funds, but now the general funds are remaining until the end of the year, and we will transfer into the food service revolving fund to make the account sustainable.
So where is the food service revolving account accounted for? Do we get a copy of that?
It's one of our revolving funds. Like, it's not in our local budget. This is just our local budget.
Right, but where is it, so I have an idea of where we're at in that revolving fund? Do we?
You can request at any time. I'd have to run a report.
You have to run a report, okay. So if you could do that, and then you may have said this, but it's late, so I'm gonna ask you to say it again. Why is it that we're not taking it out of our local budget?
The
The
salary
food-
amount?
Any, whatever food service bills we have, why are they not coming out of this line?
Because we have a food service revolving account that every school has.
It's for every school? I mean.
No, I mean, every school has a food service revolving account.
Yep,
So we have an Erving revolving account,
Yes.
and it's not represented here, but it
This
will
is
be.
just our local budget.
Right, but the revolving account isn't represented here, but it will be if we requested it.
If you would like to see the revolving account, I can send you information on the food service
Yeah.
revolving account.
Also, all the other, there's more than one place where it says line used for transfer at end of year if necessary, and that applies to
That's
both
what
of those.
that line is. Yeah.
That whole, yeah, there's a revolving account for, what is it?
I think after school also. So,
Yeah, after-school academy
yeah.
and, okay.
Okay.
so I'm asking though, let me ask it a different way. Why is the first line, why is the first go-to not our budget and the revolving account fill in if we need it? Why is it done opposite?
Because our revolving account takes into, it has all of our expenditures, all of our revenues, it handles all of our reporting. It's not, it's a revolving account, so it takes into account both expenditures and revenues.
So
If you get-
that's just an easier accounting system for this particular line than pulling it out of, like all of our other lines we pull out of as we use it type of
Yeah,
account?
so that way we're able to put in the revenues and take out the
Yeah.
expenditures.
Once
If you were gonna look,
revenues.
we don't have revenues for, say, field trips. They work differently.
Yep,
Right.
okay, I'm just trying to understand the process, thank you.
So then what
guess
happens if the
tomatoes.
money that is budgeted here isn't enough to fill that revolving account?
Then that revolving account would go into the next year with a deficit, and we would budget it accordingly to try to get it back into the positive.
So it would be good then for us to have a report of that so that we can keep track of it along the way, so we know whether we're getting close to that 26,000 or not.
Sure, I mean, we've got a number of special funds that you can request at any time. We sat down with Deb Marrow earlier this year to reconcile. David and Brian Smith and Betsy and Pat sat down like last week to look at these accounts, so.
But what I'm saying is, so instead of waiting to the end of the year and hoping that 26,000 covers it, we should be checking in on that more frequently to have a gauge of where we're at with that, so that we can tell ahead of time if we're getting close and if we need to be doing something different. Is that,
I mean, we do check on these accounts. Do you want to check on them also?
okay, so you're checking in on them
Yes.
monthly, whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we want to see it too.
Yeah, I think, why not? I mean, I think that would be
This
helpful.
year where there's a lot of stresses on finances, both in town and say, just mentioned earlier, trying to be upfront, find some money to assist in that roof project. There's stresses on the budget this year that there may not have been in the past.
I do have to warn you, I have to leave in 5 minutes. I'm losing my sitter.
I understand.
Okay, so I think at this point, based on the fact that I've requested a couple of things, I don't feel comfortable taking a vote on this tonight because I would like to see a couple of different scenarios happen. So, which means that we would need to come together again at some point to decide on a budget that we're gonna present when we meet with the joint.
And that's not that far off.
Right. So, so I would like to make a request that we table this until a meeting to be named soon, in a moment, so that we can get a couple of different versions of this budget and look at these numbers a little more carefully. How are you feeling about that?
I'm fine, I want to know the date.
Yeah, we'll
What
make the date.
what I want to know is what's the date we have to present our budget to finance
On the 12th,
On the
February
12th.
12th.
on the 12th? Okay,
Yeah,
it has to be
yeah.
done
Before that.
before the 12th.
I mean, that's the first time we present the budget. It can change from
Oh,
there, but,
yes, but
I'd
it
like
needs
to
to be
make
as
it
much
as.
done as possible.
Yes, and therefore, I don't feel like tonight we're ready to do that.
Can I just ask that you email me with the specific things you're looking for? I know we're on a short window, and I want to make sure that we get it, I have it prepared correctly.
Yep.
And quick question while I have Lindsay here too, because I know we talked about supplies and materials, and a lot of times we're keeping it up in the about 10,000s high. One idea was math curriculum might come up, knowing that we want to make sure we have money there to purchase that, but it doesn't sound like that is something that we're going to do next year. Is that accurate?
I think that I need to meet with the math team to get a better handle on where they're thinking in terms of next year. At this point, I don't think it sounds like for next year, but I don't want to say that.
And we're obviously not purchasing it this year. So if we have a huge amount, because I think we talked about that last time too, is that there's a lot of money that's sitting in different supplies and materials, specifically, textbooks or whatever, knowing that that's not a need for this ELA curriculum, because it sounds like we're
Like a lot of money, like
$10,000,
well, that wouldn't cover
$15,000.
That wouldn't cover a back program.
Correct, but if it's sitting there now and maybe we're asked to pull money to pay for this engineering thing, we can look at that line item and say, actually, we can take that because we know they're not purchasing an ELA textbooks and they're not doing that math this year. And then knowing or hearing from the school as a need, like, hey, we're actually going through this whole discovery process and investigating new math opportunities, we know for FY blah, 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 that we're actually gonna need a significant amount of money to be able to, purchase these materials, and really hearing from, everyone of that's the goal. Instead of like, oh, we're just gonna put it there because we've put it there for the last 3 years, or we're just gonna put it there because we think eventually we're gonna need it and we're afraid for it to go to zero and not get it back, which I don't think is the case. I think each year we just have to look at what those needs are and reflect on that and be able to move money around in the line items. And one year it might look very dramatic of, hey, we actually used a ton of money, and then we're able to look, okay, we just bought X, Y, and Z, but we don't actually need that living there year after year.
Well, but you do, because there are consumables that come with.
Right, and so that information is helpful to know, like for this program, because not every program has consumables. It really depends on the program and the needs and what that,
And I think
has.
that those are definitely conversations that Caitlin and David and I've had with other principals as well for their buildings, because the amount of money that you're gonna spend year to year in the consumables is important, obviously, to budget for. So I wouldn't say just then take that line item. Can I just say, I think that there is one piece, like in thinking about data and curriculum and instruction, I put, like, my job is to support teachers and to support all of the hard work that's happening. And so I put out the support and the level of need that they need, but I trust them to do what they need to do for our students, and I know that's happening. And I feel like sitting in this meeting tonight, there is a level of trust that's not happening from this committee to us as employees. I feel like there was a level of trust that me standing up there sharing about the data and the instruction felt like somewhat of a blame, right? And I feel like that in terms of some of the questions you're asking Caitlin, that you don't trust us. And so that is how this feels in this meeting. And I think it is important to bring up to you, because here I am coming to a meeting for the first time, and it doesn't feel the way I would hope a meeting would feel. So I feel like I owe that to the committee to say, and I owe that ultimately to our students, because that's who we're here for, and that's who you need to entrust that we're doing our jobs, because I can say, I know all of the people I work with are doing their jobs. So I couldn't leave this meeting tonight without saying that, because I was hoping it would feel different coming tonight.
I mean, it's unfortunate that you feel that way. I don't think that we feel that way. I don't think that we asked anything. I don't think we're trying to put blame. In fact, I think we're trying to learn more about the process so that we can ensure that we are getting the kids what they need. And I think that's why Caitlin's asking that question. Are there consumables that we need?
No, I
Do
agree.
we need to keep
I
that?
agree that it is, that you're coming at this as in a learning way, but the way it's feeling is like there's a lack of trust.
Okay, well,
I really want to say that I expressed to you that, I had a lot of trust and belief in what you presented here and what you've presented at the supervisory meetings. I feel like it's necessary as a school board member to also say, parents have asked me questions, because they don't always ask the principal or the teachers. And if they come up and they say, well, what about this or what about that, I need to say that. But as I said, your presentation seemed very clear-cut and very straightforward, and it looks like the teachers are getting the support they need to do what they need to do. As to the finances, that's a whole different ball of wax. We went through a pretty chaotic financial situation last spring.
I was here.
Huh?
I was here.
Yes, some down, some up. And then come summer, or can't come later on, the rest of the town operations were looking for the same kind of support that the school got, and they did not get it. And whether it was highway, whether it was police, they felt that, you know, they had been told, forget it, we don't need you guys. And then when, you know, the select board came forward and said, well, really what we can do to balance it out is to have a 2.5 override. And it went down big time in the meeting, and it went even worse during the vote. And I mean, I voted for it, and I felt like it needed to go forward, that everybody in town needed the same sort of support. And they didn't get it at all. And they didn't even get it from the school community. A significant number of people who were supporters of the school said, no, I'm not going to support it. And for the police, for the fire, for the, you know, and then, wham, we got hit this, when the court case came down, we got hit with another whammy where we have depended for a long time on our bills getting paid by industry in this town. And the courts turned around and said, no, we have to readjust the assessment so that the residents of the town carry more of the total tax burden. You can't shift it as high as you have been to the pond on the hill and the power plant underneath. And
I think asking all those questions and having all that information is really important, but I think it's important that us as the employees and the school committee work together, because look at that data and those kids that we're talking about. And I didn't feel like we're working together tonight.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I'll just say that my questions come from complete curiosity and wanting to be full of knowledge. They come because I'm interested. If I wanted to just nod my head and go, yep, that's great, and that's me caring, right? Me caring is asking those hard questions, asking investigative questions, making sure that we're doing all we need to do. And sometimes the questions that are asked are more so those answers are shown publicly, and I actually might know the answer to them. And I'm gonna ask those hard questions anyways, because those questions are coming from the community or coming from other places. And being a part of education and being in education, I know what's going on, but not everyone else does. And I think that it's not a lack of trust by any means. It's more of, hey, guess what? You got this, and let's prove it to everyone that you have this. Let's prove it and show everyone, look at all this great work that you're doing. Who is keeping people accountable? Oh, great, it's these people? Great. There is something going on. I think there's a lot of doubt in what is actually happening, what is going on behind the scenes, like Mark said, or people are saying Erving doesn't feel like it is the same that it used to be. Okay, but just saying that and just going, isn't gonna solve that problem and isn't gonna change or influence that thought process or help improve that. And so by asking questions to get more information, to be able to say, like, look at all the hard work they're doing and look at what else has changed from the expectations and the guidelines and the standards. And these students are working so hard and these teachers are working so hard, and look how we can support them. Is money the way that we're supporting them? Is resources the way that we're supporting them? Is more opportunity throughout the day for PD a way of supporting them? And being able to show what we're doing to accomplish that goal. So my questions are never coming from that distrust. My questions are coming from curiosity and knowledge and empowerment to really prove all of the wonderful work that is going on here. So I just want to make sure. I mean, we get those tough questions all the time of, why is Erving's budget so high? Why is the cost per student at Erving so much higher than so many other schools, but their levels and their scores are here? And so trying to find what those factors are and why they are so different and being able to share that is huge, and so I just hope that that's where a lot of this conversation is coming from, so that we can get more information out and that we can make more informed decisions where those decisions are based on the needs of the students and the students at Erving.
And I feel like the way you just presented it feels more like a team. So I
So,
urge
sorry
you
if
moving
it-
forward
if it
to make
felt
it
You have to
differently, but-
understand that that's our role up here, is to ask those questions, and so.
I understand that, and I don't mind the questions at all, but the overall feeling that I got in being here, not just in my presentation, was the lack of trust. So maybe in the presentation of how we're asking questions, we can be mindful of that. That's all I'm asking. Because what you just said, Caitlin, was all those questions you asked me, but it felt very different there. So
I want to
don't
throw
want to take
one
any
other.
more time of this because I feel like it was an important thing, but.
I'd like to say.
I want to throw one
Hang
other
on,
thing
let
out
Mark
in a
talk
minute
first.
on the finances that has always been driving a lot. One of the things that's going on here is that, and this has, I don't know whether it affects instruction at all. I don't know, because I don't know what the other schools are like. I hear rumors that some of them have some similar problems, but we have these capital problems in addition. And whenever I say to somebody, oh, we're going to meet tonight about a roof leak, and I hear from a resident, oh, yeah, that was going on when my kids were in the school. And then I think, if the roof has been leaking for that many years, are we going to end, I mean, nobody at our little meeting on the Capitol seemed to feel the same way I did, but I kept thinking of Sunderland, where they had a roof collapse, and they had to shut the building down. And I'm like, how many years have we been having a leaky roof? Because what happens with a leaky roof, eventually, is it falls down, in part, somewhere. And it's like, I came here and subbed as a teacher's aide on days when there were leaks around the skylights, and I'm like, that's still going on, and we better fix that, and we better find the money to fix it. So we're in it in both, the education, we're in it but we don't drive the curriculum. That's not our place. Our place is the building and the budget and getting the town to support the school.
Thank you. All right, in the interest of time.
Jen wanted to say something.
Well, can we move on to the next agenda item?
Well, I'm going to need to step out if you need me to speak to the 1% virtual school issue,
I do.
because that letter did go to both you and I, but I can speak to it. And then perhaps you can either do the policies or we can table them till another time. So a memo went out from Ruth Hirsch at DESE to the chair and myself relative to the Commonwealth Massachusetts virtual school statute. And each year, a school committee of a sending district may vote to restrict enrollment of its students in a Commonwealth of Massachusetts virtual school if the total enrollment of the students enrolled in that Commonwealth virtual school exceeds 1% of the total enrollment in the district. So based on our October SIMS data, we were informed that we exceeded the 1% of total enrollment, and we have this committee has three choices. They can vote again to restrict enrollment for the next school year in Commonwealth Mass virtual schools. They can vote not to restrict Commonwealth Mass virtual school enrollment, or they cannot vote and the restriction will hold. So we need that vote. It needs to go in to DESE by March.
Just so I'm clear, not voting and voting against it result in the same.
Correct, but those are your choices from the Department of
Okay, I
Elementary.
just want to make sure that was the case.
That's the vote. I agree.
Yeah, it was a little confusing, a little odd. Maybe I'll say not
It is.
confusing, but odd. Okay, so we restricted in prior years.
Correct.
I move that we restrict again this year.
Okay, is there a second? I'll second it. Oh, sorry. That's okay. I didn't know if you were, not choosing to.
No, Mark, I'm writing it down.
Yeah, no, that's okay, you're doing two jobs here. So there's a motion and a second to restrict the enrollment for next school year. Any other discussions? Yeah, it's okay, I don't want to look at you. Okay. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Mark?
All right,
Thank
yes.
you. Just for the record, we can call it unanimous.
Okay, then
Okay.
the form letter will be sent to Desi,
You'll take care of that?
memorializing the vote, yes.
Okay. Thank you. We did skip over the end of the year audit. It's a vote to allow the chair to sign the audit engagement letter.
I move that the chair be allowed to sign the engagement letter.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Any other discussion about that?
Call the question.
Oh, Caitlin left. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Pie report. Poor pie report person. Now you're doing 3 jobs.
Yeah. It's super quick, so we're good. I just need to find it. So we did not have a meeting in January. Schedules just didn't align, and our normal meeting time fell on a holiday. But we did raise a little over $1,500 with the calendar raffle, which is super exciting because we haven't done that fundraiser in a couple years, and we kind of changed it around a little bit. So we now know that there is a lot of interest and are excited about that. So calendar raffle winners are being picked each week and posted on Facebook and on Class Dojo to then pick up their winnings, which seems to be going really well. And congratulations to all that have won so far. Our next meeting is Monday, February 5th at 7 p.m. A link will be posted on Class Dojo and on our Facebook page. As always, all are welcome, and we would love more parents to participate, so feel free to hop on that virtual meeting to see what's going on with PIE.
Excellent. Okay. If nobody has any objections, I would like to I'd like to make a motion that we table the policies until a future meeting, based on the fact that it is late and
So moved.
the weather is not great. We just finished mine. Does anybody have, I mean, were either one of you waiting for that specifically? I don't want to, okay, thank you. All right, is there a second on? Oh,
I'll
you
second.
Okay.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Our next meeting is, I do want to make sure people are aware of this. It is February 12th, which is a different day than our normal meeting. It's also at 5:30, which is at a different time, and it's also at a different location. It is over at the Senior Community Center, because we will, after our meeting, have a joint meeting with the Select Board and the Finance Committee to talk about our budget. So please note, different day, different time, different location. And the policy meeting will, you're gonna keep the policy meeting on Tuesday, March?
It's
Oh,
gonna
sorry.
be, we're skipping it. Yeah.
Yep, skipping February. It'll be Tuesday, March 19th. Yes, sorry. All right, thank you
Make
to
a
those
motion.
of you that held out for this length of time.
To adjourn.
Yep, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
9:46.
Sure. Is there a second, Mark? Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you.